BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. And welcome to our discussion on Thomas Henry Horton and the Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986. And as you see here, though, this is listed as Part 9. And if this is the first one that you've clicked on and you haven't heard the previous 8 parts, that's fine, you can keep listening, because we're just having a discussion about the Zodiac Killer and a very large alternative theory out there. So, what can I say? In the previous segment, we talked about the movie Bloodlust, and if anyone has by chance clicked on this link first, I'm just going to reread a segment here that Thomas Horton wrote in his book, The Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986. By an even stranger coincidence, when Graysmith was attending college in Oakland, local theaters were showing a re-release of a 1961 B-horror film called Bloodlust, a loose remake of The Most Dangerous Game. And The Most Dangerous Game, of course, referring to the story-turned-movie where people are hunted for sport because man is the most dangerous animal of all. In this version, the shipwrecked travelers are hunted by the island's lord and master, individually and as couples, uncannily similar in appearance to all of Zodiac's purported victims. Okay, so after reading that yesterday, I found a copy of Bloodlust on YouTube. It actually seems that there are multiple uploads right here on YouTube that you can watch for free. And the way that I was going to approach it was, forget Thomas Henry Horton, forget Robert Graysmith, just simply looking at the possibility, are there any clues about the Zodiac Killer in this movie? I mean, that's a bold statement that he made, that all of the people who are the kind of purported victims in the film Bloodlust are showing resemblance and similarities to that of the Zodiac victims. Are there any clues in this film that could tell us anything about the Zodiac Killer? So after watching that, what I would say is, one of the victims bears a striking resemblance to Brian Hartnell. Another victim, the taller gentleman in the film, had a very striking resemblance, facial resemblance anyway, to Mike Mageau. There's one woman in it that she's a blonde, and yeah, you could say she has a little bit of similarity to Cecilia Ann Shepard. And the final woman there, I didn't think that she had any real resemblance to Darlene Ferrin or Betty Lou Jensen, but I should note that one of the characters was named Betty. However, that was a very common name at the time. And there is a fifth person and this is another sort of similarity that I noticed that wasn't mentioned here, not only talking about the appearances, but we had 5 major Zodiac victims, right? Of course, possibly Sherry Jo Bates, possibly Kathleen Johns, but there are 5 people in this film. One of them is much older and kind of disconnected from the group, and that reminded me of what we said about Paul Stine, because with the Paul Stine killing, Paul Stine was the oldest Zodiac victim, but he was only 29 years old, and when I was looking at the ages of the victims, that really shocked me. It's like, was this guy deliberately targeting younger people? Or even if you're going to entertain the Thomas Henry Horton Zodiac Killer Hoax theory, why is the Zodiac Killer only going after younger people? Is this just like a coincidence? Is there not an ounce of meaning in the ages? But in this film Bloodlust, you see that not Thomas Henry Horton, Paul Stine was older than the other victims, and there is an older character that's disconnected from the group. You have 2 sets of couples, and then there's this older character who becomes a victim. Not to give away too much, I never like to give away movie spoilers, even if we're going to be discussing some things like this. But as we mentioned, though, in terms of his statement that the people in this film Bloodlust from 1961 all have uncannily similar appearances to all of Zodiac's purported victims, just to look at his quote again, I'd really say that only 2 people in that film actually had striking similarities to the Zodiac victims. And I said one looked like Brian Hartnell and the other looked like Mike Mageau. And while I was watching the film, of course I'm pulling up the images on Google, just kind of comparing, face by face and how similar are the victims and such. But an interesting thing about that as well, Brian Hartnell and Mike Mageau are the survivors. It's really hard though if we could, at that point, that's kind of just going off talking in circles if we're just going to be looking at things like that. I mean, there's no possible way the Zodiac would have known that those two people would have been the survivors. And this is something that we mentioned as well when we were talking about the Texarkana Moonlight Murders from 1946. It's a very similar case to the Zodiac Killer. You have someone, a hooded killer, the Phantom Killer as he was known. He's wearing a hood, he's targeting lovers' lanes, he's attacking couples, and there are also 5 victims. And some people have even put out the possibility that the Phantom Killer was the father of the Zodiac Killer. But, I think the 5 victims thing, it's just a coincidence. It has to be, because the Zodiac tried to murder more than 5 people. And the same with the Phantom Killer. He tried to murder more than 5 people. It's just some people survived the attacks. Okay, though. Well, what is the real lesson in all of this? What I can say about Thomas Henry Horan is, and I don't know about you guys, if you've been listening to the previous 8 parts, or if you've read Thomas Henry Horan's books, the feeling that I have so far into this is that everything seems like it is close, but no cigar. Close, but no cigar. I can appreciate what he is trying to do. I can understand where he's coming from. But I just don't feel overwhelmingly convinced in having that aha moment when it's like, this is the only possibility. Oh my gosh, this guy hit the nail on the head. I'm not completely there yet. I don't have that feeling listening to things that we've been talking about, as well as reading the stuff here in the Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986. I just wish that I was more convinced, because, even this thing here from Bloodlust, I was expecting to find a lot more similarities, and just to find some more clues. I can say, though, that, some of the victims are somewhat similar, but think about what we've said in the past about the Zodiac's appearance, and like the glasses and the haircut. Those things were extremely popular at the time. Like, countless men wore those types of glasses in the 1960s. And if you look up some older photos of Paul Stine, he even looks kind of like the Zodiac Killer. Not around the time of his death, but about 10 years before that, in late 50s and the early 60s. It's a very popular fashion trend at the time. So I think Horan might have read too much into that. But about the whole concept of being, just having this unconvincing presentation, I went into this Thomas Henry Horan thing not really just trying to debunk him and tear his theory apart. I really thought it was going to be to the contrary. I thought that this was going to be something like, okay, this guy's probably going to provide a better explanation than I've ever heard before. I really had a lot of optimism, but I would have to say, though, maybe my expectation was a little bit too high, because every sort of explanation that he has provided for things has really just left me with the feeling of, I really want to accept your theory, but at the same time, I just don't feel it's completely there yet. And there's some other things, though, about like looking for clues in the movie Bloodlust, and he was really talking about the appearance of the individuals. But as I said, this isn't only about Thomas Henry Horan now. Looking through the movie, were there any other possible clues? Like, could the Zodiac Killer have watched this film in 1961 and then thought, okay, I now have this idea, I'm going to create this type of persona known as the Zodiac and put this into action so that I can continue on with this, put this into real life, because people do get inspired that way. And what I have to say about that is, the killer in Bloodlust uses a crossbow, he doesn't use guns, he doesn't use knives, he doesn't wear a hood. All of that seemed quite different, but, well, what I can say is there are also other possible victims on the island. It sounds kind of a little bit like how we're always guessing about Sherry Joe Bates and Kathleen Johns, as well as perhaps 37 other murders that were committed by the Zodiac, or 37 murders total. Once again, though, I really was expecting that we would see just a little bit more when it would come to things like clues in this particular film. But at the same time, though, I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad that, if someone's going to put out something like that there are similarities between these people and the Zodiac victims. I don't know about you. I was just like, the whole power grade goes up, and I'm like, I'm going to see that movie, and I'm going to find out if there's any truth to that. I think all parties right now are in somewhat of an agreement that the Zodiac Killer was inspired by The Most Dangerous Game. The whole thing about, I want to kill man because man is the most dangerous animal of all, that feels just like, it's like right out of The Most Dangerous Game. So what we can say about stuff like that is it's not baseless. And even this claim here that there was a film made in 1961 that has victims that look like the Zodiac victims, well, that's not necessarily baseless. And people can approach that with a certain sense of curiosity, if you will. So I was really just expecting to find a little bit more. But at the same time, I mean, one of the real good things about Bloodlust is when I found it on YouTube for free, the version that I saw was only 1 hour and 8 minutes, and it was, I mean, it's really a short movie. And in terms of watching a film, it really could have been a lot more exciting. I know it's a B movie from 1961, so there's no reason to be overly critical, but it's like, if they're going to be making a film like that, they could have made that way more horrific. They had so many more opportunities to create the thrills of cinema. And I mean, though, I like short films, though. Unless I'm watching The Avengers, I don't really want to see anything that's 2 hours and 30 minutes. I don't know, I think David Fincher's Zodiac was 2 hours and 37 minutes. I remember that because that's one of the reasons why I didn't watch it for so many years, because I'm like, gosh darn it, I don't want to sit through a 2 hour and 37-minute film. I mean, I saw the movie Open Water in 2018. That was 1 hour and 18 minutes. That's a crap movie. I mean, maybe some people liked it. I just was not into that one, but it was 1 hour and 18 minutes. Dreadful but short. And with Bloodlust, I mean, I'd highly recommend everybody give it a try. Maybe someone would see something that I wouldn't. And if you haven't seen the film Bloodlust already from 1961, available here on YouTube for free, I'd be very curious if anybody else would be able to find something in it that could be tied to the Zodiac. Once again, I really thought that there were only two people in the film that had very direct similarities to the Zodiac victims, and that would be Brian Hartnell and Mike Michaud. Two of the actors have a resemblance. So, I guess the challenge question is, how big of an influence do you think things like The Most Dangerous Game would be on the Zodiac Killer? Was that a big inspiration? And do you think that there are any other pieces of art that we can look at that could have possibly inspired the Zodiac Killer that would give us some clues? I mean, art, cinema, music, anything. If you have anything to say at all, maybe we can dig up some of that Gareth Penn, Michael O'Hare stuff again and talk about some of the poetry that he tied it into. But if you have anything to say at all, please drop a comment below. I would love to hear from you. If you like this upload, please hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed already, you're welcome to subscribe. But most importantly, leave some comments below so we can talk a little bit more about the Zodiac Killer. And until next time.